Good evening, guests. Would you please begin making your way to your seats as we would like to commence with our interactions for tonight. Thank you. Once again, guests, if you would kindly make your way to your seats, we would like to commence with our activities for tonight. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
It's not working right now. These are your mics.
This is your night to talk about budget, and so we don't want to take much time, but I want to introduce my Mayor Pro Tem Sarah Nurmela.
Can we try it? Three. Yeah. They're all right there.
Zadi. Councilor Carmel.
Can you hear this?
And we have bias here. Councilor Hott and so, Councilor staff member, this is your time to hear everything. Since you come from all different neighborhoods, the first Tuesday in August is National Night Out, and it is time to start thinking about your parties. And if you have any questions, see any counselor afterwards. But that's a fun evening. It's a time where fire and police come out to your It's not an emergency. So it's great for kids. It's great to know your neighbors because you are the pioneers and you help fire with all that. So National Night Out, first Tuesday of August. Just call the non-emergency number. Ask them to place your name on the list, and we'll have a fun party night. Now, staff is going to tell you about budget process, and then we'll get started with the questions at your tables. I don't know who's first up.
Thank you, Mayor McNally. Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Lindsay, and I am Assistant City Manager and Chief of Staff for the City of Westminster. We're going to roll through the agenda here. We're already into our budget presentation, and we'll get into our small group discussion next. And at the end of the evening, we'll have a report out from individual tables. I want to talk a little bit this evening about the city's budget and the funding priorities that are up for discussion tonight. So I mentioned I'm the Assistant City Manager. I supervise the municipal court team, our city hall operations, and our city clerk's office. But most importantly, I supervise our budget team, many of whom are here tonight at your tables to help out the discussion we're having. So as city staff starts our budget process annually, the first place we go is to the city's strategic plan. And our city council worked recently to update the strategic plan, and I want to highlight our guiding principles this evening. I want to read the language that City Council worked on because I think it's very important for you to hear word for word what our City Council put down for each of these items. So for collaboration and partnership, enhance and sustain our relationships with neighboring governments and community-based partners, leveraging our collective resources for maximum impact and benefit to Westminster. Stewardship and fiscal responsibility, responsibly manage all of the resources entrusted to our care to support the city's financial well-being and meet the needs of today without sacrificing the ability to meet the needs of the future. Transparency and accountability. Engage meaningfully, transparently, and responsibly with the community to provide for all people to be heard and included in the decision-making, thereby building trust and confidence with the community. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Achieve equitable outcomes for the people of Westminster by providing opportunity for all voices to be heard and drawing upon community diversity in decision-making. Innovate and initiate. Foster a culture of continuous improvement and approach opportunities and challenges with drive, inventive thinking, and resourcefulness, resulting in a resilient and sustainable future for our city. Prevention and proactivity. Solve problems at their source and focus the city's policies, practices, and investments on prevention and community education, and addressing root causes leading to a better quality of life and greater prosperity for all in our community. And lastly, sustainability and resiliency. Act and operate in an environmentally responsible manner and lead by modeling best practices and incorporating sustainability in every aspect of our work. From these guiding principles, City Council outlined strategic priorities. 6 strategic priorities, which I'm not going to read through because they're at your table. They're listed on the boards, they're listed on the worksheets in front of you, and that's the work you're going to be doing tonight. The city's budget and its budget processes are based on a host of best practices that are laid out by those that work in government finance. The city has received a budget award from the Government Finance Officers Association for the last few years. And I'm really actually pleased to announce to you that just yesterday morning, the city staff was informed that we were awarded the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award for our 2024 budget, which we're very excited about. Thank you. That's 4 years in a row now. We've been creating a best practice-based budget, annual financial report or audit, and the one on the right is a popular annual financial report, which comes out at the end of a fiscal year and describes, in layman's terms, the items that come out from the city's audit. So I started with strategic plan in terms of our budget development, but there's a whole host of other inputs that go into developing the city's budget. We start with revenue projections across hundreds of different categories of revenues that the city receives every year. Then we look at operating budgets, the funds that are needed to implement those strategic plan items on a daily basis and keep the city running. The city has a capital improvement plan, or CIP, you'll see on a later slide. We have a city engineer who works in collaboration with our policy and budget office to set many capital improvements that the city works on over the course of the upcoming 5 years. The city has a human services board that's appointed that reviews grant applications from organizations across the city to support the members of the Westminster community and distribute funds around food security, housing assistance, mental health services, and other forms of support to people in need. We also do utility financing and rate setting for our utility. We assist with current and long-term operational and capital needs that set rates and provide inputs into the city's annual budget. And lastly, we work on alternative funding options. So your tax dollars are not all that we spend. We bring in many grants and other opportunities to help extend the tax dollars so the city can accomplish more every year. Our budget philosophy, and really it's more than a guiding principle, it's actually in law and statute, the city has a balanced budget. That means that revenues in equal the expenditures out, and any funds or reserves that the city has from one year to the next. And that's a balanced budget every year. I want to talk briefly about the city's 2024 adopted budget. The city's 2024 budget, I describe it as a $400 million budget. Think of the city as a $400 million corporation. The city has in savings at the beginning of 2024 about $170 million. We project to bring in $378 million of revenues, spend $397 million, and end with $153 million. And using that fund balance or savings account, we do that in a number of places, but I think our biggest highlight for 2024 are some significant water capital projects. Breaking those revenues down just a little bit further are some major categories across our entire city. The city's general fund, our utilities, all that rolls up into that total almost $400 million. So certainly sales and use taxes are the city's biggest revenue stream, and then charges for services come in just behind that. Those are utility rates. What I would like to highlight here is property taxes, down the list at 2%. The city has the lowest property tax rate amongst our comparison cities on the Front Range, and we provide very good value for the tax dollar because of that. That was the revenues. Now our expenditures side of the equation. So about 60% of that $400 million is operating expenses. That's the money that it takes to put a police force on the road, firefighters in trucks and in stations, snowplow operations, people, salt in those snow plows, and everything that goes into operating a city. The city pays a good chunk of funds to debt service to fund long-term capital needs. And then I mentioned our capital improvement plan, then we also have a contingency there at the end. Interfund transfers are money that goes between our funds and the city's account structure and doesn't actually leave the city. Now, just a little bit more detail on those operating expenses to give you an idea of those areas where we're at. From this, you can see that some of our biggest expenditure-based departments are around public safety, and public works and utilities. Lastly, on this section, I want to highlight our capital improvement plan. So many millions of dollars here that are spent on an annual basis across a whole host of projects. Many of these, the pink and red colors, are amongst our drinking water and wastewater funds. That's the majority of those major capital projects for 2024. So we've been talking a bit about our budget process and where we are, and I'm really pleased that we've moved up to number 3 tonight, our budget town hall. The staff took a lot of input from the community and city council following the adoption of the 2024 budget, and we're really seeking this input, and we've built that into a number of places through this process. Some key highlights of our budget process. In August, the city manager will propose that first draft of the balanced budget to City Council. City Council reviews those items in September. They have a budget review and a public hearing for more input on that in September, and then for adoption in October. So it's quite a process that we work on. And adding to that process is the feedback that you all are going to provide tonight. So we're seeking to gather community input about funding priorities, requests for projects and programs to be considered for our 2025 budget process. Those can be submitted through a community request form that's available on the city's website, and it's open through May 23rd. Those folks that are watching on the stream can access that right now as well. The input that we received tonight and across that community request process will be shared on the city's website and during our June 3rd, 2024 budget retreat study session to guide our budget development over the coming months. Now, if I could, let's move right into our budget activity workshop for the evening. We have a series of prompts at your table and a counselor and a staff member to guide you through these prompts. And at the end of the activity, the city councilor at your table will report out to the room the priorities, a couple of priorities from your table. These are the questions. They're listed on your table. And right now, I'm going to turn it over to your individual small groups to lead these conversations. Thank you.
Can't wait to hear what every table had. It was just interesting. At our table, we had people from different areas. We had people with different backgrounds and how they saw the world and the city. Just fascinating. So I can't thank you, and council can't thank you enough for being here tonight to share with us. I can't wait to see the results, especially of the strategic priorities. Our table, it just was great. So our first question, and I'm not going to reread anything, I'm just going to go down what some people had put because we're to be quick and short here. Open space and trails. We had several check marks by police and fire and public safety. City puts things together well. Drinking water, preserving history, and live citizen response. They like that. Number 2, partnering with education because they feel that the vocation piece, some people just don't go to college, but the vocations are becoming critical because everybody needs a plumber, everybody needs an HVAC person, and since the schools have their own governments, so we need to partner with those folks. Transportation, accelerate improvement and minimize congestion. Missing trail links, Northwest Rail complete. It's an economic hit having it end at only one area of our city. Downtown to be completed, retention pond at Savory Farms causing water in basements. Then we came to the big sheet, and numbers were all over the place, so I'm anxious to see with all of your numbers put together where we end up. But under access to opportunities, some of it was affordable housing, quality of life for citizens, and making it charming. The economic vitality, healthy economy, and vibrant properties. Community empowerment engagement, we do a good job, and council listens. Business and community. Resilient infrastructure, maintain and support infrastructure. Roads, rail, and water. And if you don't take care of those, a statement was made, you're one step to the ghetto. Community, health, and safety. Promote need to feel safe in after hours and weekends. Organizational vitality, partner with schools and technology again. Leadership makes or breaks. Number 4, missing funding, open space and trails. In 2013, open space went to Parks and Rec. No line item about buying land and misalignment with some of our trails. We haven't connected everything. Website is bad, nothing for people visiting, no official tourist department, and accommodations tax is there. Maybe we need to use it for that piece. Historic property funding to maintain these buildings, and we do have 5 champion trees in Westminster. Grants, they talked about grants and maybe being more aggressive with some of that. People love old towns, and ours feels disjointed. Enhance and promote historic places, handicap only, having the beeline to the end. That was repeated over and over. And the butterfly pavilion, they didn't know the status of that, but they said save it. Number 5, again, parks, open space, and trails. Take care of invasive species plants. Farmers' line trails needs work. Water, can we expand? A question came up about our reclaimed water, and since we don't use it during the winter, could we put what we could use if it was winter into a lake so we have it to use for summer to be able to add to our other parts of the city. Adding 2 fire stations, cultural resources, what is good? We have nothing but the high school facility, and the Historical Society shouldn't shoulder all the costs for history. And that's it. Councilor or Mayor Pro Tem Nurmela. And then Sarah, I'll let you pick who goes next.
want me to just keep going? All right, I can talk loud. All right, so oh, dang it, I was going to yell and kind of enjoy it. All right. I'll stand over here. So for number one, things that we valued about Westminster include open space and access to amenities and parks, and just the overall quality of our public safety, and the city feels safe too, and just safe to our residents. For number two, which was where could we potentially improve, we had water rates for HOAs, fire station infrastructure, and objectivity of survey language that goes out. And then we focused a little bit more on the strategic priorities and just understanding what we valued out of them. And there were a couple of key themes for us. One was just our overall accessibility and opportunity to be safe and healthy and have all of our community members have a common sense of well-being and connection to one another. And so that can also be described as more specifically our public safety, ensuring that we continue to have a strong fire and police department and services related to that, opportunities to gather, as well as a focus on our affordable housing needs and economic vitality and creating jobs for folks. And then we also focused, the other piece was on the well-being of our infrastructure in our city as a whole. So thinking about core services like our water provision, clean water, and I can't read the writing, it's too small. And just our resilience of new development, just making sure that we are thinking strategically about our existing and future development, how we can make that more, water conscious and just hazard conscious as a whole. And then, what was number four? For our funding needs, we were hoping that we could see funding go towards Lexington Trail, more support towards human services so that we could keep people housed, and just working with partners more to ensure people have access to food and safe environments. The dog park, specifically the Westminster Hills open space, and to implement the stewardship plan and to maintain it. And then focus on our aging infrastructure and make sure that our roads are good to drive on, and that we are taking care of our water and all of the sanitary sewer and all the things that make our lives easier. Who's over here? Oh, Councillor Ireland, you had your back. You're next.
She's hiding.
Hello. So for the first question, what do you value most about living in Westminster? And it sounds like everyone so far likes the trails and open space, and they feel fairly safe in our city. As far as what the city needs to improve on, transparency was talked about a lot. And one of the ideas that was brought up at our table is to have a separate website just to tell the citizens what's going on, like have a calendar for the month and a calendar for the week with all the events, where they are, how to get there, and they just feel like that would be more transparency, because there's a lot of events that they have missed because they didn't know that they were occurring. So, so the number one on ours was access to opportunities, better police funding, affordable housing, in that as it's structured now, affordable housing, once you make so much money, then you're kicked out or your rent goes up. And the idea is to allow people to stay like a couple years and save that money to get something better. Instead of being kicked out once they get a job, it makes no incentive to make their life better when they're in that situation. And there's they're concerned about curb corners in the city and accessibility to those in wheelchairs. Number 2, that was about the website I talked about and city events. And number 3, they're concerned about our roads, mostly for infrastructure. And the potholes, they don't feel they were sealed at the last event properly, and they're back to where they were before. They said better maintenance, sealed. When you have events like that, they think you should at least have a cone there till they are set up. Sidewalks, there's parts of the city that have no sidewalks. And they are not in support of the new water treatment plant because they're afraid that the water rates will be too high because they're already too high. Number 4, economic vitality. They want to draw businesses that will draw people from outside. And one of the thoughts was this tennis center, using the Moore Middle School for that. And parking. Oh, the parking at the new downtown they think should be free because it's confusing and making people so they don't want to go to those businesses. And also the QR codes are not working throughout the city on signs. So they're thinking there's something wrong with the QR codes because they're not going to anywhere. So that's a problem. Number 5, code enforcement. They don't think code enforcement is effective or happening across the board or fairly. I also suggested sensitivity and conflict resolution training for our employees from outside the city. And customer service, they don't like when they call the city and don't get to speak to anyone. It just goes to voicemail. Community health and safety, they don't like e-bikes on trails. They think it's unsafe. And the e-bike owners are not even saying that they're there, so they don't even hear them, so it's very unsafe. Transparency about possible environmental contamination, asbestos in areas. What else did we say? Lead, like the airport, and also the Greenway Path and all that. They're concerned about the plutonium there. Safety protocol for city council meetings, how we go through security. They want a better way of doing that. They don't think it's across the board being fair. So that's what we discussed, and thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you so much. We had a lot of really healthy discussions over here, as I'm sure we all did. And so I will start with questions 1 and 2, and then I'll highlight the top few priorities that we wanted to talk about. The things that we liked, I think we've heard a lot of already. It's very similar. We really appreciate the openness of the city, the parks, the open spaces, the trails, the bike paths, the dog parks, and the general lack of congestion, as well as our superior recreational centers are some of the highlights of Westminster. And some of our concerns in the city are the possible expansion and rapid growth, possibly becoming congested. And we'd also like to see more added programs and facilities for our aging population, possibly to our rec centers or just throughout the city in general. And we highlighted concerns around costs, such as for the water plant and around density housing and ensuring that we have proper fire codes related to our multifamily housing. Okay. So those are our high-level city items. I'm just going to go through the top 2 areas that we talked about in our strategic priorities. We talked about economic vitality a lot. We wanted to ensure that there's job opportunities, especially for our young folks that want to stay within Westminster, and we do have that interest, which is exciting. We want to ensure a wide variety of jobs at all skill levels, and ensuring that we incentivize and use strategic development to encourage larger employees such as tech or aerospace to come here, as well as help protect and subsidize our smaller businesses, especially in historic Westminster. And this economic vitality is closely related to the access to opportunities, and we talked about the fact that we need diverse housing, mobility, affordable housing, just to ensure that we can work, live, and play within Westminster, as well as have public transportation opportunities and more inner-city transit, and ensure that our bike paths are connected and well-connected to where we need to go, as well as where we would like to go for hobby. And then we talked about community health and safety a lot. We talked about opportunities with our aging population, our dog parks, our trails and bike parks, as well as access to medical care, hiking, and having a safe environment overall. We said that access to these opportunities encourage a flourishing community, and they keep a healthy community overall. We also mentioned that the environment falls under community health and safety and ensures quality of life. And we want to ensure that we keep our scenic views, and we specifically mentioned the Stanley Lake eagles and eagles throughout the city. We want to protect them. And then one point I missed that we really talked a lot about under economic vitality is, the businesses, we want to encourage them to come, but how do we make sure that they stay? And so we really want to ask, how do we find out ahead of time when the businesses are struggling, and how do we provide them the opportunities that they might need to ensure that they stay open? That covers it. Thank you. Let's see, where should we go?
Hello, I'm Counselor Hott. So a lot of what we talked about as far as what we value about living in Westminster, a lot of it is the same. It's safe, beautiful, our recreation centers, libraries, parks, open space, good quality drinking water. And then as far as where the city can improve, some things that were talked about is better communication. From staff to our community. So an example was summary notes after council meetings, but then also better advertising for community events such as our Valentine's event and our fall festivals, and making sure that we're having town halls and activities in different areas of town, so that way we can increase diverse participation, especially different economic levels. So we're hearing from everybody and not just from the same people each time. And sustainability, having defined emission goals, quantifiable objectives for Westminster operations. Cost of living and affordability. We talked about the need for people to be able to get into housing, but also how important it is for our seniors to be able to downsize, because there are a lot of seniors in our community that want to, but we don't have the smaller homes for them to be able to downsize in. And then increasing solar, incentivizing solars for our city and residents, and and then an idea was having carts or shuttles to help with pedestrian mobility to attractions, so arts, farmers markets, and to overcome challenges like busy streets for those who may not have a car. And better enforcement, especially in school zones, for patrolling traffic. Our traffic is out of control. A lot of people are speeding through school zones. A lot of people are running red lights. So better patrolling for traffic. And then as far as our strategic priorities, number one for our table was community health and safety. And we talked about establishing neighborhood watches, which is something that we used to have. Better advertising for coffee with our cops. That's one of the things that we do, where our police officers will have coffee with residents. So better advertising, climate safety, making sure we have plans for natural disasters such as fires or floods, and better communications for those kind of emergencies, and better response times. And then as far as access to opportunities, empower neighbors to connect and create networks. Kind of goes with the neighborhood watch, but our neighborhoods are safer when we know our neighbors. We are having conversations with them. We're not just coming home, closing our garages and shutting our doors and not having community with our neighbors. And then making sure that we are looking at the unique challenges for those who may need county services, and working together with other cities to combine resources, such as for something like a homeless navigation center. And those are what we talked about at this table. And I will pass it on to Councillor DeMott.
Thank you. I'm Councillor DeMott, and it's very clear that I ran my table a little bit different than you guys, so if you imagine that about me. We took the questions that we had and we fit them into the strategic priority buckets. And so I'm going to hit just a couple of things out of each of the buckets for you, is the way that I'll approach this after hearing you guys report out. So on access to opportunities, there was a lot of talk around sidewalks, ADA, making sure that that's available across the city in all parts. I'm going to go kind of from the ones that got the least amount of fanfare when we rated them. And then community health and safety, they talked a lot about just the good open spaces. They talked about on the trails, making sure that people, specifically they were talking in the dog park, that both the people who are there for the dogs and the bikes work together to make sure they watch out for each other. We talked about maybe a little self-policing in each of those groups. Then organizational vitality. There was a feeling in the group to make sure that we are paying competitively and taking care of the people in the organization to make sure we get the best and brightest, is the best way I'd summarize that. There was also talk around making sure that the organization addresses any kind of transparency issues or issues with people who aren't maybe listening to the community as best they could. So then the top three were economic vitality, resilient infrastructure, and community empowerment engagement. And I want to tell you that just to kind of tell you how we came to that, because we were told we were supposed to pick two. I don't know if I was the only table who was told that, but I told them they could pick three. And the reason that they picked three is without economic vitality, it was pointed out that the rest of them don't happen. So they thought that that was really important to point out. And so they talked about business opportunities, potential having somebody in the city who welcomes in new businesses and helps them on their way through the building process, or just setting up a business, and potentially, just programs that I will tell you throughout the whole thing, there were a lot of things that were asked that the city actually does do. So I could tell you there's probably some room for better communication in some of the programs that I know we have. And I shared a lot of those with our group. But then when they talked about the other two things that were really important to them were community empowerment, engagement. They talked about a lot about the dog park. Dog park's very important to this table and figuring out, both from the cyclist aspect and the dog folks. So I thought that was good. And then in resilient infrastructure, it was very important to this group that really in both of these, that there's balance with all those things. Whether we're talking about the dog park or our water infrastructure, this group really wanted to make sure that we were looking at it from both angles and making sure that we have a balanced approach in how we solve problems, whether, building our infrastructure, handling the dog park, so that we make sure that these things are sustainable and they're good for everybody. So with that, you're the last one. Take it home.
Okay, so, whoa. All right, that's pretty loud. My name is Obi Zadi, and my table had a very exciting conversation. I would say that before I get started, the number one takeaway that kind of sums up everything that we talked about is that the city has a lot of value, but no one knows about it, right? So communication was really a theme that you'll see throughout these suggestions. The first thing we talked about was what they loved about it. So they love how engaging we are with the citizens from a Citizens Academy standpoint. So if you don't know about that, that's a very cool program that you should sign up for. They love the volunteer program that we have. It's very organized. The view of the mountains was talked about a lot. We have great views here in the city. Transparency, they loved how there's opportunities for public comment, how there's boards and commissions for giving their input, so that's good. It's an easy place to live. offers most of what you need. They love the parks and recreation, so we have the best trails in the state. They recognize that. They love our libraries and the programs that are free for children. They also love how accessible we are as a local government and the street signs. So specifically, this one is my favorite. The street signs in the medians. We have street signs in the medians that tell you where you're about to go to. And they love that. It's rare. And trails, open space, walkability, right? So that the connectivity is great. Now, on the other end, we talked about the improvements. There are lots of improvements, and speaking to the walkability piece, the other side of that is we still have significant mobility gaps in the city. Transit and transportation needs to be improved. Technology needs to be improved. The website is not great. I think we can all agree on that, and we are working on that, but that was a theme as well. Arts and culture, we don't have enough senior programming, and the ones that we do have aren't enough of them, so we don't have enough people providing senior programming in our rec centers. And as we know, the population is aging, and this demand will only go up. Communication was the biggest thing, like I said. We have a lot of surveys, and they're too wordy, they're too long. We have a Westy Water app that doesn't work all the time. It's great when it does work, so there are some good stories as to significant value that the Westy Water app brings, but there's a lot of bugs and glitches to it. And overall, on many things that we do, we have a lot of projects in the city, but we don't tell the bigger story enough as to why this project is important. So we tend to tell you what's happening, but we don't tell you the why this matters. So that was a big theme too. The big storytelling needs to happen more. And the Sustainability Center, most people don't know that we have that now. It opened 2 weeks ago. Back to communication, we just need to be able to tell our residents what's happening, the events, the projects that we're doing. That was a big theme. So next, temporary tax. So we have a lot of cars, and I've actually received this quite a few times now over the last few months, but there are a lot of cars with temporary tags that are expired, and we don't seem to be enforcing that enough. EV charging stations, that's one of those, more and more residents have electric vehicles. We don't have enough stations for them. And a great suggestion, I think it was you that had the great suggestion there, that we could actually have a map as to where we have EV stations. So it's just telling everyone where they are. So that's the basic. And then what we can do is see, okay, do we have enough, and try to expand that. And we can expand that in different ways. One way is we can lead by example as a city, have all our public buildings have enough EV station parking, but also on the other end, we can incentivize the private sector to come in and build more stations. We talked about downtown, so the messaging, going back to that again, the messaging on downtown, it doesn't explain the bigger picture. When we talk about what's happening in the downtown, we need to explain why it matters, why the investment that we've made in the downtown matters for the whole city, and that's been throughout this exercise, the same theme. We need more proactive ways of addressing the needs of the unhoused. We're doing a lot as a city, but we could be doing much more. The militarization of the police department, there are some fears in this table that they don't want to continue to militarize it, but rather increase ways of distributing their calls. So the co-responder program, everyone here loved that, and they want to expand that because that's one way of making sure we can focus the police on the crimes that really make the most impact and not on these other calls. Inclusionary zoning came up. So that means when you have a percentage of units of a development that is locked in for affordable housing. This table seemed to believe that that's very important, that we actually get more affordable living. We have a lot of ritzy, very expensive houses and rents, but we don't have enough affordable housing units locked in. So inclusionary zoning is one way of doing that. and that can help with workforce housing, so teachers and nurses and police officers and firefighters can live near where they work and all of that. We need to invest money in IT. I think it was 1%, less than 1% when they saw the slide, is in our IT infrastructure. And this table believes that that's a big security risk. So we should be investing much more in that and making the technology much more accessible. And then on the other slide, we showed how much dependency we have on sales and use tax for our revenue. It's over 60%. And obviously, we never want to have too many eggs in one basket. We need to diversify our revenue streams, right? So that was a big risk that, and sales tax is regressive. And that was pointed out that we shouldn't be putting so many eggs in one basket that that impacts the poor much more than the rest of the population. And the city should continue to be careful and prudent on water usage. So the water supply, we need to not only communicate more to the residents as to where we are and the bigger story, so going back to the bigger story piece, but also just making sure that we're managing supply much more closely, and keeping the water rates much more affordable. So there was a big discussion on how that we recognize that water rates are unaffordable for a lot of low income and fixed income families. What do we do about that? A suggestion came up on maybe we can have a water fund that targets those populations, because people are barely surviving right now on the water rates that we do have. And then we talked about strategic priorities. The top two that this table prioritized, the number one was resilient infrastructure. And the number two was access to opportunities. So for resilient infrastructure, we talked about how there's a lack of urgency, or a perception of a lack of urgency from council and city staff on fixing our roads and prioritizing infrastructure. And we need to be much more honest about the true cost of our needs. So I think that also goes back to the bigger story. What's the bigger story of water rates, of the road fees, of all the various infrastructure pieces that we pay for? And then regional and local mobility, we need to focus on that. Like we mentioned earlier, the connectivity of our trails and making sure that you can walk and bike, not just be a car-driven city. And then to access opportunities, low-income waterfront, like I mentioned already. And then for the community empowerment and engagement, we talked about how we have positive relationships with our public schools, and to maintain that and to continue to maintain that. And then finally, new fire stations. As we age as a population, we'll continue to age fairly rapidly over the next 10 years. There's going to be more calls for EMS, so we need to be proactive on how we can invest in the stations that in the staff that we need to actually support that new demand. So that's a summary of what we talked about.
Thanks for hanging with us. We went a little bit over, but your comments are wonderful. I can't wait till we get them written up so we can see all of them put together. You are invaluable, and let's give thanks to the staff that came tonight to help us keep on track. Took time of their night to be with us, and be safe going home. Stick around and talk if you want to, but thanks for being here tonight.